All right, Thrive Nation, on today's show, we have a guest who's going to teach you how to create organizations as amazing as the people inside them. However, Z and I felt like we needed to give you a quick disclaimer. This only works if you have great people on your team. Z, would you not agree, Z?
Well, I mean, yes, of course. If you don't start with something great, it's like building a cake. If you don't have great ingredients, you're not going to end up with a great cake.
So if you push out authority and give away control and you give your authority to people that are less than great, this doesn't work.
You want to start with good people. And, one of the things, Clay, that... are we still on?
Oh, we're still on.
Oh, good.
This is a passive-aggressive way to change the emotional undercurrent of the intro.
Well, the thing about it is that you have to be very proactive, and you have to use... Are we on again?
Oh, yeah, you're still on. I just want to change the emotional undercurrent yet again to get us in the right mindset.
You're jacking with me. Some of the techniques that we teach you, and that is group interviews, you have to be very selective in the people you bring on your team, because I tell you what, when you've worked hard and you have a baby called a business, it's your baby, it's your child.
Yes.
And you say, listen, come and help me raise my child. I mean, you're not going to hire a nanny without checking her out. Am I right or am I wrong?
You're correct. So what we are saying is that we love the principles taught on today's show. But we want to make sure we're equipping you, the listener, with the knowledge of knowing that the systems that today's guest is teaching you will not work if you have crappy employees.
Right, and even like he says on the show, you got to listen to find out. But he says, listen, even with crappy employees, you might be able to make it happen. But I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of a little sketchy on that. I mean, I'll just be honest with you, Clay. I'm a little, we both have had jackasseries that have worked for us.
I think today's guest, he's talking about if you have people in your office that maybe need a pick-me-up, they need some coaching, they need some encouragement. That's different than a nefarious person who's always stealing the staplers and eating all the food in the office refrigerator. Well,
you're right, but the thing about it, too, is that when you live in Silicon Valley,
yes,
and you're surrounded by the most brilliant people, tech-savvy people in the world, sometimes your view of humanity is maybe a little skewed.
So you know what I'm going to do? We're going to go ahead and play the show now, but I want to get that disclaimer out there because
I don't want to bust anybody's chops. I want you to know that everybody's redeemable. Everybody can increase. Everybody can get better. I don't want to.
But we also didn't want listeners to go out there and thinking, hey, Carl has been a 3-time serial killer, but we can hire him to run the restaurant because we've empowered him.
I can change him.
Right.
I can coach him up.
We're not encouraging you to go out there and hire repeated felons for armed robbery and battery and assault. Hire those people and give them the authority. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
That's not what our guest is saying.
I've spent my whole life building this business. Billy, I know you've been in and out of prison for your whole life. I want to, you know what? But your brain matters, and I want to give it to you.
Billy.
But to think about it, there's a fine line.
There's a fine line. It's a line that's fine.
There's a line that's fine. It is innovative to push down authority and to get people on the ground level in the trenches.
But you don't want to defund the police.
Are we still on?
I think we are still on. Can you hear me now?
No, yes, I can.
Okay.
No, I don't want to defund the police.
You don't want to defund the police.
I don't.
Okay.
When I call 911, I want them to come in hot and fired and lights blaring.
3, 2, 1, boom! You are now entering the dojo of Mojo and the Thrive Time Show.
Thrive Time Show on the microphone. What is this? Top of the iTunes charts in the category of business. Drilling down on business topics like we are a dentist. Providing you with mentorship like you are an apprentice. And we go so fast that you might get motion sickness. Grab a pen and pad to the lab. Let's get in this. It's time to bear some fruit like some Florida oranges. 3, 2, 1. Here come the business ninjas.
Yes, and yes, Dr. Z. It is always ecstasy when you are next to me. How are you, sir?
Fantastic. It's always nice to hear that when you're next to somebody, it's ecstasy. That's a thank you for that.
Let me tell you this.
I mean,
this day,
I hope you're not being disingenuous.
No, I mean that. I think a lot of times people just throw out the word ecstasy casually. Paul, you've seen this before. You've seen people that just...
We've dissected it on the show because...
The word means an overwhelming feeling of great happiness or joyful excitement. And that's how I feel about today's guest. Gary Hamel, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
It's great to be here. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Gary, you have had a ton of success in your career, but you did have to start at the bottom. en route to making your way to the top. So where did you come from, my friend? I mean, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Michigan. I did an MBA there. I spent a little time as a hospital administrator, decided I didn't like to go to the same committee meetings every week, went back, got a PhD, moved to London, spent an amazing time, a decade there. I'm still on the faculty of the London Business School, and for the last, I don't want to tell you how many years I've been living in Silicon Valley, but getting to talk and work with really amazing people all over the world.
You have chosen to live in Silicon Valley. Give me the highs and the lows of the valley. Like what's the best part and the worst part of living in the valley?
Well, the best part is that you are among the greatest concentration of PhDs and smart people in the world. And, every day you wake up feeling pretty humble and knowing that you have a lot to learn. The downside is that right now Silicon Valley is probably like Detroit in the 1950s. It's a one-industry town. It kind of thinks that it can dictate to the rest of the world how life should work. It feels a little bit invincible, and so it can also be a little bit incestuous sometimes.
Can you talk to me about, because Silicon Valley is big into censorship right now, what's your prediction on how that's going to sort itself out?
I like everything, we have a technology that's gotten way ahead of society's ability to understand it and to know what to do with it. And so, we have laws that were written for broadcasters and journalists that had to exercise certain standards, were responsible for the content they published. All of a sudden, you have these new platforms where anybody can post an opinion, however scurrilous, based in fact or not. And so I think collectively, we're figuring this thing out, just like we're figuring out, how our kids use their smartphones. And there's definitely going to be mistakes, and we'll dig ourselves out of those. I'm pretty confident that in the end we're going to get it right. But there are very, very powerful interests, at stake on both sides. But this is really unprecedented. What do you do when everybody in the world has a microphone, when facts move across the world, or semi-facts or non-facts at light speed? So there's a lot to figure out here.
Well, I have a fact, Dr. Zeal, a hard fact here about Gary.
Yeah.
Gary, are you photoshopping your headshots? Because you are a beautiful man.
And he smells really good too.
Well, I don't know how you guys would know that, but thanks for the compliment. Once you get to the long side of 60, you're grateful for anything.
Well, we have cameras and we have technology everywhere.
You're looking
we have
good.
technology that's even ahead of us. So
This is impressive.
And Gary, real quickly, back up a second. So Michigan, so were you a Wolverine or a Spartan? Just out of curiosity.
I was a Wolverine.
Amazing blue, baby.
And,
there you go.
And a proud one. And I was there during Bo Schembechler.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
A lot of Rose Bowl triumphs, which I have to say have been short on the ground in recent years.
Well, that's kind of what I call pre-PC time in our lives, when it was. Oh yeah, and then when you were in London for the decade, did you ever do the the Killers tour that I did one time when I was in London? What was the guy?
Are you making this up right now?
No.
Is this a real
Jack
thing?
the Ripper?
Jack the Ripper tour. Did you ever do Jack the Ripper tour while you were in London?
I think I avoided most of those tourist things. When you're an American in London, everybody assumes you're a tourist.
Oh yeah.
And but when you're there and you're going to be there for a long time, you try to learn the culture, learn the customs, learn the language. And I tell you, it was amazingly good fun. My dad was in Britain during the Second World War. He took me to the country when I was very young. I'd seen again and again through the decades how people had underestimated the British. And it was an enormous honor to be there and, to get to work with smart people, get to work with politicians and companies and so on. And of course, when you're in a place that has a culture that goes back centuries and centuries, you can just be a sponge and learn and learn and learn.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Now, what was the moment when you figured out what you wanted to do professionally? I mean, when did you finally have that epiphany and you thought to yourself, this is what I want to do, Gary?
I think a lot of it came, I was in a PhD program at the University of Michigan in late 1970s. And for a lot of your listeners, that's in the dark ages. But that was really the first time the dominance of U.S. industry had been challenged. And I could see how General Motors and Ford and so on were really struggling to compete with this new breed of competitors from Japan, Toyota, Nissan, Honda, and so on. The U.S. consumer electronics industry, brands that now we've forgotten like RCA and Sylvania, those were going to the wall. And it was clearly that what was happening here wasn't just about a new technology or new product, but there were other ways of thinking about how you motivate people at work and how you involve people in solving problems. And so that drove my curiosity to understand, well, why do some organizations win and others lose? And that cultivated kind of a lifelong enthusiasm for really understanding organizations, management, strategy, and so on, and how those determine how we live our lives, the productivity, how national incomes go up and down. But it really started by being there in Michigan at a critical point in time when kind of our sense of mastery, economic mastery in the world was challenged as never before.
Did you have a defining moment in your career where you felt like you were beginning to gain traction? I mean, when was the moment where you felt like, yes, I'm finally getting some momentum here?
I think it was an accretive process. It was a slow process. I remember being asked, I'd written an article, I don't remember when, it was the late 1980s. I'd written an article called The Core Competence of the Corporation. And I remember getting a call from the head of strategy at IBM. And, I don't know how old I am at that, maybe barely 30 years old or something. But I have this call, maybe 33, 34, saying, will you come talk to the corporate executive board of IBM? These are the 25 most senior people at that time, the largest and most powerful technology company in the world, and they told me that no outsider had ever been invited to talk to that group before.
Wow, cool.
So, I said, well, there must be something here that I've stumbled onto, some perspective that resonates with people who spend, every day trying to do the right thing in business and struggling with all those challenges. So that was one of those things where you said, all right, maybe I'm on the right track here. Maybe I can make a positive difference.
See, that's well done right there.
That's well done.
Come on,
High
fives
all
you
around.
a mega point.
High
You get a mega point and a holy cow and a mega point. Now,
Wow.
okay.
Wow.
And I know that's what you wanted out of your career, but then you got the mega points, you got the holy cow, all the things that you were looking for. But Garrett, you made a poor life choice and agreed to be on our show to talk about your new book, Humanocracy, creating organizations as amazing as the people inside them. Sir, what inspired you to write this book, and why have you chosen to make the poor life choices needed to be on our show?
Ooh, good question.
Double question.
Double.
Tricky.
Two-part.
So far, the choice to be on your show is working out pretty good.
Okay,
I'll leave the final judgment there to your listeners and to you guys.
Sure, okay. That's fine.
But clearly, one of the most valuable things in life is having a sense of irreverence and being able to poke fun at yourself. And clearly, you guys have mastered that. So that's wonderful.
We have so much material. We have so much material available. I mean, your
It's
book,
hard
though,
not to.
the cover of your book, it screams open me. It's a gorgeous cover of the book. What fired you up to write this book?
Let me see if I can put it in a relatively small nutshell. I've had the chance to work in hundreds of companies all over the world during my career, and amazing people, amazing conversations. But what really struck me is that many organizations struggled with the same sorts of problems. They were slow to change. Change often took a crisis, as happened, in Michigan with the auto industry, or you could see Microsoft struggling for years with new competitors like Google. We saw the traditional broadcast television industry struggle with new competitors like Netflix and YouTube and so on. So it was clear that organizations had a really difficult time with change. It was clear that many weren't very good at innovation. Traditional organizations usually weren't the ones that were changing our lives and bringing the amazing new products to us. And most of all, looking at the data and my own experience, it was clear that there were a lot of people in organizations who were not having a very good time. You looked at the data from Gallup that said only 15% of people around the world are really engaged in their work, or that only 1 out of 10 believes that their opinions matter at work. And you go how did we end up here? How do these companies filled with really smart people, and yet they have these kind of systemic disabilities that how do you explain those? And what made it odd to me and demanded an explanation is the people I met in my life didn't have those disabilities. The people I meet in life, they don't suffer from inertia. They're resilient and they're adaptable and they try new things and they're courageous and they're daring and they're creative and they're inspiring and they inspire other people. So the question was, why do our organizations lack the very qualities that make us human beings? And you dig into that and you kind of go back in history and go okay, this is the problem. Our organizations were built, the kind of foundations of them, about 100 years ago, at least the intellectual, the conceptual foundations 100 years ago, when the problem was taking mostly illiterate employees and turning them into semi-programmable robots and turning out, endless Model Ts, and so on. And yet those old kind of bureaucratic, top-down, disempowering structures were still with us 100 and some years later. Made no sense, but that was the fact. You could see this in every organization, that somehow they were less capable than the people inside of them. And you realize, okay, you know what? This is something we created. It doesn't have to be this way. The world has changed a lot over the last 150 years since bureaucracy was a new idea. You know, most of our employees are pretty smart these days. We can move information around. We can train them. The world is changing at light speed. And so we got to rethink kind of the fundamental ways we bring people together to get work done. And maybe instead of organizations that are based on, you know, hierarchies and lots of rules, we need organizations that really empower individuals to do their best work. So that was the dawning and the thesis of the idea behind the book.
Well, what I'm going to do now, it's going to get wild. So I want you to just picture in your mind what's going to happen, Gary. Psychologically prepare yourself for what's going to happen. I'm going to ask you a question about your book. And it doesn't matter how bad my question is. Z's going to one-up that question.
Oh, yeah.
And then Paul Hood's going to really one-up it again. And then Charles is going to come back around. And we're gonna just really kind of break down a few of your core ideas in this book. And the gloves are off, Z. So you could feel free to one up.
Okay, I'm bracing myself.
Okay, here we go. Goodness. But it's kind of a lightning round. We're going fast, okay? Here we go. So motivation. In your book, you talk about, in the book Humanocracy, you lay out this detailed blueprint for creating organizations that are inspired and ingenious. So I'd like for you to take a moment to speak a little bit about motivation, rallying colleagues to the challenge of busting bureaucracy. Talk to me about what your book says about motivation. And get ready for Dr. Z's rebuttal. It's going to be rough.
All right. Well, the motivation is pretty. The motivation for like busting bureaucracy and building more human-centric organizations is pretty simple. It's what people deserve. You know, if you look back over the last centuries, you know, when we've been up against institutions that put barriers in the way of personal growth and achievement, whether that was aristocracy 200 years ago, whether that was slavery, whether that was patriarchy, you know, at some point we say enough is enough. And we say, you know, we really want to work in societies and institutions that give everybody the opportunity to shine and be their best. And so it doesn't take a lot of work, you know, when you kind of draw people's attention to the facts, the data that our organizations aren't working for ordinary people. It doesn't take much more to get people excited on, okay, let's change this. Now, you have to give them some help on how do you do that. But the basic idea of giving everyone around you the chance to be their very best at work, that's something that, you know, once you put that out there as a goal, a lot of people, they just know fundamentally that's the right idea.
So you're saying that my way of doing that I have a sign up at my office, and it says the beatings will continue until the attitude gets better. You're saying that's
so
not
motivational.
That's not a very good motivational.
Where there's a whip, there's a way.
Yeah.
Are you advocating that he takes down
I choose a stick instead of a carrot? I mean, are these wrong?
Gary, should he take down these quotables?
I don't know.
You know, there's a certain amount you can get with that approach. You can get obedience from people. You can even get them to work hard. You can get them to stay late and put their back into a task. You know, maybe you can even find some smart people who are willing to put up with that. But what you won't get out of people are the things that are most important today in our economy. You won't get creativity. You won't get passion and daring, and you certainly won't get initiative. And those are the things really that distinguish, you know, a high performing organization from one that's not.
Probably not even thank you cards. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, I said probably not any thank you cards either. I would think so. That's important.
And you know, and if you think about it, those human qualities, initiative and creativity and passion, those are things you can't command. I mean, you can say, you know, I want you to exhibit those things, but those are gifts. They're literally gifts that people choose every day. Do I bring these to work or not?
Now, Gary,
and all of the data says that most people don't. And
now,
you know,
Gary,
so the whip will take you so far.
Gary, I want to slightly argue with you potentially here, because there was a time in my life, and then I know Paul's got a better question than me, but there was a time in my life. I worked at Target, I worked at Applebee's, and I worked at DirecTV, and I was just figuring out that if you're a bad employee who chooses to be a bad employee, you're going to get fired. I was just discovering
this. Just getting that figured out, yeah.
And so I was working at DirecTV, and they had a move where if you could call the same number over and over, it showed you had an artificially high call time.
Sure.
So the guys on the call team, they're saying, hey, Clay, here's the deal. If you just call the same number and hit read out over and over and over, you'll get bonuses because they think you're making the most calls. Another pro tip I learned at Target, they said, hey, here's the deal at Target. Nobody ever checks the whatever camera, so you can have unlimited pretzels over there. And that area, that's the unlimited pretzel zone. You get all the pretzels you want. At Applebee's, the move was if you work during this certain shift, you can have steaks and whatever you want because no one checks inventory. So there's always nefarious employees, of which I was one as a young man. I was a jackass for a small period of time. I was. What does your book say when you're managing a young jackass version of myself, the kind of person that should be booed when he enters into a room? What does your book say about that?
Here's the thing. If you build an organization where you are trying to control other people through complicated rewards and systems and oversight, you are going to fail. People are going to be more ingenious at figuring out a way to beat the system than you're going to be in designing that system. So the organizations I profile in my book, they try to turn that around. They create organizations where everybody feels like an owner. That means giving everybody financial upside. It means making you accountable for not some BS kind of synthetic argument, making you accountable for the true P&L of your unit. It means teaching everybody how to think and act like a business person. You see this at a company like Nucor, America's most successful steel company, where they've organized this big company into 200 kind of teams that really think and act like business owners. You see it in Hire, the world's largest appliance maker, that divided an 80,000 person company into 4,000 micro enterprises. But when you feel that something is yours, and when you have a direct stake in its success, you start to behave in ways that drive that success, and you get the rewards from it. The problem is the kind of top-down, rule-driven approach that we have in so many organizations, where we treat people like idiots. Guess what? You get idiots, and they'll take every chance they have to screw the system that's screwing them. So, you got to start from really this question of how do you build an organization where everyone feels like an owner, everyone has a stake in success, and no one feels like an employee.
Well, Gary, I think, and this is Paul Hood, I think what Clay may be saying, and I interpret it, is, we counsel people, the clients that we work with at Hood CPAs, through things I've learned from my coach, Clay Clark, is you hire attitude versus aptitude. And, of course, if you don't have the things that you're talking about established in your company, you're going to lose those people, because even if somebody comes in with a good attitude and desire to win and be a part of a team, they're going to leave. So, but I think the question I have for you is, would you agree there are certain people that, you can't coach up, you can't counsel, and so ultimately you have to have that person that has the desire or the systems and the opportunities and the incentive-based pay type scenarios don't work. So you still have to start. Are you saying you can take any person like Clay was, he
like an 18-year-old jackass version of myself?
So you think you could take somebody like that, or do you think there still has to be a happy medium of somebody who has you hire attitude versus aptitude?
Well, I think there are a couple of questions in there. Number one, for sure, hiring for attitude is important. If you look at Southwest Airlines, America's most consistently successful airline, they put enormous emphasis into hiring people that are empathetic, that kind of resonate with passengers. And you experience that. The seats aren't any better, but most people would say you experience that on Southwest in a way you maybe don't with some of their competitors. So I'll definitely say that's important. Having said that, I was on a call literally just last week with John Ferrioli. He just stepped down from Nucor, as I said, the most profitable steel company in the United States. And I asked them that question. I mean, they have this extraordinary track record of beating their competitors. Their revenue per employee is 3x the global benchmark. And he said, Gary, I think we can take just about anybody and turn them into an extraordinary contributor. He said the reality is most people in their private lives, they want to do the right thing. They want to get ahead. Mostly they make wise choices. And so he was probably a little bit more optimistic on that question than I am. But I'm way more optimistic, I think, than the average company, which starts with this assumption that, most people are there to slack off, to take advantage of you, and so on. That's not what I see in the people I deal with, every day. Now, are there sociopaths out there? Yeah, for sure, and you're going to get some share of those. But in the organizations I talk about in my book, the way you weed those out, it's the peers that weed those out. It's your colleagues that say, we're not going to put up with you. In many of these organizations, there are team-based rewards. And the teams themselves, relatively low-level teams, they hire their new colleagues, and they are looking for people who are going to pull their weight and make a contribution. And if they don't, the teams will fire them. And so, I think, and in general, we show up, we stand up for people who feel like friends, for people who feel like peers. So, yeah, you're going to get some bad apples. I think that's inevitable. But I think the proportion is a lot less than people think because, one of the arguments I make in the book, and pardon my language, but in a way kind of bureaucracy makes assholes of us all. In that, it kind of sets us up and says, it infantilizes us. I mean, think about it. The average person you guys would meet can probably buy a car. And it's expensive purchase. Maybe it's a used car, but you buy a car, maybe even buy a house. At work, that same person cannot buy a $300 office chair without getting somebody's permission. So what's the message that person, like, you think I'm an idiot, or you think that you can't trust me with the most basic, thing. One of the companies in the book, Morningstar, the largest tomato processor in the world, it's a company that has no managers at all, based in just north of Sacramento in California. Chris Ruford, the founder, he said, we never lock anything up at the company. Every toolbox, every shed is open. Anybody, if you want to take something, like, you can take it. But he said, my problem is if I lock things up, then I've just sent a message to everybody in this company, I can't trust them. And if I can't trust them with, a $100 tool, how in the world am I going to be able to trust them with a $100,000 business decision? So, yeah, they're bad apples. They're people who are going to exploit the system no matter what that system is. But I think there are ways of mitigating that, and it starts by treating people like adults.
Gary, I actually know somebody that can buy a house and a car put together. It's an RV. I know that. That's a third. I've got a deal. I've got a question for you. When you go out and you consult businesses, which is really very cool, and you call it the management jam. Do you not like jelly? I mean, why do we have to?
Oh, nice.
Why is it jam? Why is it? You literally go and you jam with them. I mean, you bring
music,
your boom box.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like
I have. If it's okay, I would like to play, Gary. I have your theme. So this is what Gary. Whenever Gary goes to a consulting gig, this is the music that he plays. Let me play real quick. Let me cue it up.
Oh yeah.
He walks in.
Oh yeah.
To a consulting gig.
That's right.
It's an old Technotronic
Business
song.
XYZ. I'm so glad you had me come in today because we're going to have an intensive, action-oriented program designed to help an organization kickstart its management, innovation, efforts. And that's why we're going to jam. So everybody out of your seats. We're going to do a little moving. Okay, I mean, to your left. There you go. Come on. To your right. There we go. Come on, back to your
Gary,
left.
how long have you used Technotronic as your official jam when you enter into the consulting gigs?
I don't know, but I hope somebody's paying a license fee on that. That's not my music.
Oh,
wait a second. I don't know.
Takes the room down.
Wow.
Okay. Now, Gary, Charles has a question for you. He's a manager for one of our businesses, Elephant in the Room. It's a men's grooming lounge where guys come in to get haircuts, and he's got to make sure all the stylists are getting their haircuts on time and getting all the guys in, and there's constantly customers showing up late and employees wanting to be late, and he's dealing with that log jam every day, all day. But before he asks you a question, what companies are featured in your book, Humanocracy?
Well, all of them that I talk about are really, it's a small number that I think are really challenging a lot of old management dogma. So, for example, Nucor, I mentioned, Southwest gets a fair amount of attention. Michelin, the French tire company that's pushing authority down to its front lines. Hire a China-based appliance company that owns GE Appliance in the United States, maybe the most radical management model in the world. Healthcare companies, Birdzorg in the Netherlands, which runs a 16,000-person home health organization with two managers, so a 1 to 8,000 span of control. So every industry, countries around the world, but all companies that have been founded on the premise that the goal is to turn everyone into an owner. The goal is to unleash the capacity of every employee, and then has worked from that starting premise to say, okay, what kind of system does that? And so, a lot of interesting companies that I tell you have inspired me. And I remembered, I mentioned Morningstar a moment ago, and so the companies cover an enormous range of size, from some that have a couple hundred employees to tens of thousands. But the first time I went to Morningstar, and I heard you got this tomato processor, so that's like a hard industry, process intensive, and about 500 or 600 employees. And I went to visit them, and there are no managers at all. Employees negotiate their duties with one another and then turn those into contracts between the employees, but no managers. And I went to Chris Rufer, the owner. I said, Chris, this is like crazy. I've never been inside a company that doesn't have any managers at all. And he looked at me as if I was an idiot. He said, Gary, no, you don't understand. Here, everybody is a manager. And so we've taken the work that normally we'd give these people with this vaunted title of a managers to do, and we've just distributed that to everybody in the organization. We let them do the scheduling. We let them sort out the HR issues. We let them do the planning. We let them work with the suppliers. And so that was, you asked me earlier about an epiphany. That was more than a decade ago. That was an epiphany. And then you start to say, okay, just like today, we everything we look at in our life today, we see kind of radical new approaches. So Netflix is so fundamentally different than the world I grew up in, which had a few channels of terrestrial television. But what we haven't asked ourselves is, can we think equally radical about how we organize people at work, how we bring people together to do things collectively? And so what is brought together in the book, these are kind of like, the Netflix or the Airbnbs of organization and management. These are the companies that are thinking in fundamentally, radically new ways about how you bring people together in ways that unleash their full capacity.
I realize that you have said, he's on the record as stating that Technotronic's hit song "Pump Up the Jam" is not his official song. But I had no idea. That's a statement he made earlier. Gary made that statement. But I will tell you, I have a radical belief that it secretly is his official song.
Probably is.
And with that in my mind, I'm going to move on to Charles. Charles, you manage people. What questions do you have for the great one, Gary Hamel?
Mr. Gary, all right. Now, I hear that your book speaks about motivation. I'm listening to you. You're talking about motivating your employees, and I'm just listening to you, and I'm personally getting inspired and motivated. My question to you is, where does your motivation come from?
Oh, wow. You know what?
Music?
I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that question, but I can tell you one of those events which really motivated me like crazy. This goes back maybe 20 years, and I was training a group of people at a Midwestern manufacturing company. You all know it, but I won't embarrass them. I won't tell you the name, but it's a big company. And we were training frontline. These are unionized blue-collar workers on how to think like business innovators, which you think, well, like, why would you waste your time doing that?
Yeah.
But we were teaching them, how do you get at these new customer needs, and how do you spot what's changing in the world and think how you might use that to create a new business. And I remember one woman working on an assembly line, putting big machines into crates. And she came with a little training, a little help. She came up with an idea that turned out to be a $100 million business. And as part of that, the work we did there, we took the employees, and they had kind of their early stage ideas. And we took over the space of a suburban shopping mall one weekend. And we asked the employees to go in and build out a little prototype, build a model of your idea, and just be there and show it to the neighbors. Whoever walks through the mall, get some feedback, think what prospective customers think. And I saw this woman with her kids around her. Nobody in her career had ever asked her for an idea. She's in front of this thing that's going to turn out to be a really cool thing, a big thing. And friends and family, neighbors are saying, hey, that's cool, here's an idea. And I thought to myself, I said, you know what? There is no such thing in our world as a low-skill job. We just have a lot of low-opportunity jobs where people don't have the chance to bring their brain to work, where nobody's ever asked them, do you have a new business idea, where nobody's ever invested in their kind of creative capital. And so, my inspiration comes, from people all through history who've said, how do we bring out the best, how do we bring out the best in people? And, we're trying to do that in our own little sphere. But as I said, if you go back, you look at, Thomas Paine, the great kind of political thinker behind the American and the French Revolution. He said, and he was talking about like aristocratic power. And he said a long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right. And I think that's true. We all grew up in these organizations that are dispiriting and they're not very creative. And they're, and we just assume, well, like work sucks. That's how it has to be. And what inspires me is people who say, like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. And we can start to change that. I mean, you look at what's gone on over the last few weeks with the protests we've seen around the United States calling for racial justice. And, it's just like, it's a profoundly human thing to be upset and to be frustrated when the people around you are not being given a fair shake. And I think that happens every day in our society. It certainly happens every day in the workplace. So that's what really motivates me. I think I'm probably middle of the road politically, but I really do get inspired when I see when you give somebody a chance who's not had a chance, and you see what they can do, then I'm ready to take on another challenge and keep working on the problem, because it's just immensely gratifying.
I notice how you have colluded with Charles to, obviously you guys have talked about it before the show. There was no mention of the Technotronic hit song "Pump Up the Jam" at all during that last question. And we will continue. Now I know there's a coup, there's a fix, Z, that's in.
It
Clearly,
doesn't smell right.
It doesn't. I mean,
smell right.
Gary, we have Gary booked to talk about his new book, Humanocracy. And it's obvious that he's avoiding the main thing that makes us all human, which is the Technotronic hit song, "Pump Up the Jam."
I mean,
he's avoiding it.
I know.
It's
Pump Up the Management Jam is his version.
I tell you what, this Justin, we'll move on, but we really know Technotronic Pump Up the Jam.
We don't want to move on.
We don't want to. But we'll avoid it. Fine. Now, in your book, you speak about mindsets. Now, Z, when you start playing Pump Up the Jam, Technotronic, you get into kind of a mindset,
You kind of do.
And you can't listen to this and not be excited.
You can't.
That's why all of our listeners are going to go listen to it right now. As soon as they finish the show, they're going to go listen to that thing.
Quit teasing me.
But in business, there are certain mindsets too. We have certain mindsets,
Right.
and for the listeners out there that want to know more about the right mindsets to bring into the workplace, Gary, what does your book have to say about mindsets?
Well, we all have certain ways of looking at the world and looking at the people around us and assumptions that we make, and a lot of those are grounded not in fact. They're just mental habits that we've acquired over time. One of those you see, and one of the most stark ones is you'll often hear in organizations people talk about human resources or human capital, and it's like, well, why don't we just call them people? And yet we think of people at work as factors of production, as these kind of replaceable things, one versus another, kind of commodities that you use simply to produce products. And in fact, that's probably that's the deepest assumption that I challenge in the book. Most leaders, most managers, they see employees as a resource that you hire, and then you get them focused on creating products, services, whatever it may be. And so in kind of that mindset, the organization is the thing, the company is the thing, and the employee is just a tool. They're an instrument. And if you flip that around and say, no, people join an organization to make a difference in the world, to earn their crust. It's the organization that's the instrument, not the other way around. And I really got schooled on this by the CEO of Haier, Zhang Rumin, first time I met him, and some years back, and he said, our goal at our company is to make every employee a CEO. And then he went on and he said, because we believe people are an end and not a means. And that's like a great philosophical thought. It comes, it's grounded in centuries of philosophical thought. But that's a fundamentally different starting point. And so, I found the same thing talking to managers at Nucor. One manager said to me there, he said, Gary, the least noble thing you can do in this company is to be a manager. And somebody asked the CEO at Nucor, how many people work for you? He said, what a dumb question. He says, I work for those people. They don't work for me. So I think that's where you start. You start by saying, okay, gee, I got to look at people in a fundamentally different way, not as a resource, but every individual, as somebody filled with promise, filled with opportunity, and how do I unleash that? And so if you start as a leader, as a manager, and you say, my job is not to wake up every morning saying, how do I get these people to serve my business, my organization? My job is to wake up every morning saying, how do I create a sense of purpose? How do I create a work environment that deserves these people's best efforts? And that's just that's a fundamental, it's a simple but a fundamental mindset. And once you've done that, a lot of the other pieces start falling into place.
Z, before Paul Hood has a question for you there, Gary, but before we get to the question, Z, I have audio of you and I warming up for today's show. A lot of people say, I don't know what you guys do before the show. What does the warm-up look like? How do you guys get yourselves motivated? What does it look like behind the scenes?
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if the book Humanocracy covers this pro tip, but I'm going to cue up the audio. And again, I might have to go back and do some editing because it could be offensive and over the line. But this is just, I want people to hear what it's like behind the show. This is how we get ourselves motivated. Let me cue it up here.
How now, brown cow? How now, brown cow? How now, brown gal? The arsonist has oddly shaped feet. The Human Torch was denied a bank loan. You hear me? Andre! Look at me! Woo!
See, that's our
That
vocal
did sound
exercises.
That's
how we warm up. That's just
How
what
now,
we do.
brown cow.
That's how we. It's a vocal exercises
It's an
that allow
exercise.
us to get
Wow.
ready for the show. Paul, you missed that part of.
Yeah, I'm
today's show.
glad I show up just a couple minutes late. I don't know
All
that
right,
I want
so
to.
Paul, what questions do you have for the G-force?
Yeah,
for
Gary.
the great Gary. Hamel.
Here, I'm trying to put this into play for small businesses, and this weekend I heard a pastor use the words cultural humility. And his emphasis was that we view the world through our experiences and through our eyes and our past. And the problem is we assume other people see the world the exact same way. And so we have to have the humility to even if we think we're absolutely right, that we have the humility to do that. In business, I would think the same thing applies, especially because a lot of the stuff you're talking about here seems to be with larger companies. And the larger companies, the management group, if you will, has grown up with the culture inside that business a certain way. So do you get any pushback or very much pushback because they didn't come up that way, and so now you're asking them to see the world through a different set of eyes?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do get pushback on that, and it is really, really hard for people. If you and I want to address. Let me take this in two stages. Let me start, with the smaller organizations, because learning how to bring the best out of other people is not something that is just important in a big company. It's in every company. And one of the little tips, one of the people that in the book that I talked to gave me a very good tip. He said when I first meet somebody who works for me, when I first meet an employee. He said, the first meeting is all about them. I want to know their story, where they came from, what their successes, their triumphs, their failures, what's going on in their life, their family situation, what their needs are. And he said, I got to start by building a human bridge with that person. He said, the next time I meet him, I'm going to open up about me, and I'm going to be vulnerable. And I'll tell him, where I'm strong, where I'm weak, some of the things I've done that, maybe weren't so smart. But I want them to see an open, honest human being. And he said, the third time I meet, I'm still not going to tell him what to do, but I'm going to ask him, how do I help you succeed? What can I do to make you a better, have more impact? And I think, it just struck me that it's such a simple tip, such a practical tip, but it goes to what you said a moment ago. It goes to humility. And the problem with, people in large organizations, and by large, that, I don't know, maybe it's 100 people or 200 or 100,000, but you grow up in a system where, you don't want to show weakness, where you get ahead by being a good bureaucrat, and that means, covering your ass. It means manipulating the numbers, hoarding resources, managing up, burnishing your ego, deflecting blame. And so you find yourself after a while, you're behaving, in ways with your peers and your colleagues you would never do with your friends or with your family. And that's how I think about how most organizations work. But bureaucracy is a zero-sum game where people compete for promotion, and one person wins, one person loses, and it's kind of like a massive multiplayer game. And if you've spent a good part of your career learning how to play that well and learning how to get ahead, telling somebody, hey, you got to move from manager to mentor. It's like telling LeBron James, hey, we know basketball's been really good for you, but what about this volleyball thing? And you're likely to land head first, 3 rows up in the stand. And so you do have to take a lot of time with people who, these are not bad people. These are people who just, there was a game. This is how it was played. This is what it meant to get ahead. But Marshall Gantz is a really thoughtful professor at Harvard and talks a lot about activism. He said, a game really only changes, and management and bureaucracy is a game. A game only changes when people choose to walk off the playing field. And he said, this is not the way I'm going to play it anymore. And I think that starts with a personal choice. Whether you have a company of 3 people and you're the boss, or whether you have hundreds or thousands of people, it starts with that personal choice. Who am I going to show up as? Am I going to show up as an authentic human being with my vulnerabilities, my weaknesses? Am I going to show up with somebody who's a friend first and a boss second, or not? And every one of us has that choice every day.
Well, Charles, you're on the. It's kind of an interesting idea. You work within Elephant in the Room, so one of the organizations that I own. You're a team member on that.
Yes, sir.
Team member in the Elephant in the Room. I feel like because you're managing people on a daily basis, you're in the trenches.
No doubt.
Do you have any difficult management questions for Gary that you want to ask? Because but what I know is that the vast majority of the team likes you. Gets along with you. That's my understanding right now.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any questions though? Because I think you do a good job on this, but there's got to be a little friction in the day to day. Maybe any questions for the great one, the G-Force, Gary Hamel?
What do you do, Mr. Gary, when you just have one of those team players who just don't want to play as a team? You know, everyone's coming in, spirits are high and everything, and there's always that one who comes in and you're like, hey, how you doing? And it's like, hey. It's a
I've been
cloud over their
better.
head. So what do you do in that particular situation?
You know, I think the first thing you have to do is find out whether this is like a personality disorder, whether this person is just, that's their thing, or whether something is happening in their life that is just like, they're really struggling with. Gallup data says that only 2 out of 10 people will tell you that they have a close friend at work. And there's just, there's a huge number of people who, and we've been told that we're supposed to try to keep the personal and private separate. So there's a huge number of people who show up at work every day, and they're going through divorce. They have a child struggling with addiction. They've gotten a bad diagnosis. They have a mom or dad who's terminally ill, and there's like nobody to talk to. And so you're there 6 or 8 or 12 hours trying to deal with this on your own. So I think that's where I would start with is, hey, let me understand like what's going on in your life. The second thing I look for is, hey, is there something about work that is not working for you? Are you in a role that doesn't really suit your strengths? Is there something where you felt you've like really been treated unfairly and like you've just like turned that switch off for us? So I'd start with like, what's going on in your life? Let's talk about it. Number 2, what's happened at work? Like where, is there some way we've let you down? And then, finally, if it's somebody who just, is demotivating the team, then you have to deal with that. And maybe that person gets counseled out, but that's not where I'd start.
Gary, I noticed again. This is the second. Charles. I'm tired of it. You guys, no mention of the motivational hit classic song Technotronics.
None.
Pump Up the Jam.
None.
No, there's no mention of it during the question. You two are obviously getting together and playing games behind
There's
our
collusion.
back.
Our back.
I think
it's
of the
a
word
coup
collusion.
d'etat.
Yep.
Well, I want to do a huge
Massive.
reveal.
Really, that big?
Yeah. And I'm just saying, Gary wrote his latest book with a dude whose last name starts with a Z.
Z.
And being Dr. Z, I just want to know, did you bring Mr. Zanini in just because he had his last name starting with a Z? Did that have any influence
I see what you did there.
on your choice as a co-writer for your latest book?
Gary, answer the question straight. Don't play games with us.
Don't play games because we're past game playing, right?
Michele Zanini is Italian heritage, worked for McKinsey, went to Harvard, great guy. I mean, I ended up working with him because, he was willing to stick his neck out and try to solve what seems like an almost impossible problem, which is how do you reinvent the whole world of work and organizations?
And then
just that little thing,
Okay.
Yeah. So how did you meet your co-author, and what did he bring to the table? I mean, because we thought you were the G-Force.
Did he bring half the words?
I mean, so we got G and Z-Force together. It's kind of cool.
He brought a ton of value to our enterprise. They said he worked for McKinsey and Company, which is, I guess the world's premier consulting company. Depends how you count these things, but had done a lot of work with big organizations, saw the same kind of challenges and problems I did, and was seconded to something I was doing for a while, where we invited thousands of people around the world to jump on a platform we built, a tech platform, to share their perspectives on what worked and didn't work about their organization. He helped me build that, and that was supposed to be a short secondment of a few months, but I think he found the problem intriguing, didn't really want to spend his life in a big company. So yeah, we hooked up, and just the smartest researcher, analytical thinker that I've had a chance to work with. So,
Gary, did we lose you? I think we offended Gary.
I hope not.
There you go.
Oh, yeah,
He's
we're back.
He's back.
He got scared.
I can sense the tension there because he's avoiding the
I brought up
discussion
his
of
co-author.
Technotronic Pump with the Jam. Now,
And then-
Gary, I have a final question for you, and then I'm going to let you get back to doing what you have to do. You've got many listeners out there that are saying, what is one piece of advice? You have the mic. You could share with our listeners anything at all before you drop the mic. And so I'm going to ask you, sir, what is the thing you want to share with our listeners? And I also want to know, what is your favorite old school music jam? Now, I'll give you a minute to ponder this. But what is your favorite old school musical jam? Your favorite song?
Another two-part question.
Two-part questions are great because it confuses the great guests. It gets them to blurt out the truth, which is Technotronic Pump with the Jam.
Which is what we're trying to get
But
to.
anyway, so Gary, I want to ask you, so what is your favorite old school jam? And then what's one thing you want to share with our listeners?
Anything by MC Hammer.
Oh,
my man.
Nice.
And that just begs the question: do you have the
Hammer pants?
The hammer pants, the balloon pants, the what do they call it? Parachute pants.
Yeah.
You've got a set of those. Don't act like you don't.
No more, unfortunately. But
no more. That implies you had some before. By the way,
the one piece of advice I'd give to anybody in any organization is never believe you're helpless, and never believe it's somebody else's responsibility to change the system. I think it's really easy in any organization, particularly if you're a young person, you're a new hire, to believe that if you see something that sucks, it doesn't feel right, or isn't working for you or for customers, it's like really easy to say like, not my problem, or like that has to be the head of HR or the head of IT or finance or somebody else to go do that. And the one thing I've seen again and again is that the chance you have as a human being to make a difference in the world, it is not your credentials, it's not where you came from, whatever. But if you have the courage to stand up and talk truth to power, if you have the courage to take on problems that are bigger than your role, if you come at those with compassion, and so the people around you understand you are not in it for yourself. This is not about your win. This is like, honestly, you're trying to make their life better. If you cultivate kind of the habits of being a contrarian thinker, if you ask, well, what options haven't we thought about where we trapped by our own beliefs? But if you try to bring that outside in perspective, and finally, if you work really hard at building community, if you resist the urge to ask permission, and before you go up in an organization, ask your boss, what do I do? Like, see if you can't find 3 or 4 people who will stay after hours for a couple hours and help you solve a problem. But if you cultivate those capabilities yourself, the courage, the compassion, the contrarian thinking, and that sense of community, you can do anything. You can make a profound difference. I tell the story in my book about a woman in the middle of the National Health Service. That's Britain's health system, 1.7 million employees, and without a single executive permission, she led what would become the largest change program in the history of the NHS, which touched more than 1 million people, and she did that without ever asking for permission. But and you can read the book, read her story. Her name is Helen Bevan, extraordinary person, but she refused to believe she was helpless. She refused to believe there was any problem that was too big that right-minded people couldn't make an impact. She knew she couldn't do it alone. Very smart about bringing community together and getting people to work in a productive way. Not simply, it's really cultivating that sense of what does it mean to be an activist, not an anarchist, not a terrorist, but somebody who loves your community, loves your organization, but does not feel that it's somebody else's problem and won't let anybody else tell you that you don't have the power to make a difference.
Gary, you're blowing my mind all the time. See, I might just run around here looking and acting like a mime after this show. I'm just speechless.
Oh, okay. So Gary, a.k.a. G-Force.
G-Force.
You've been now redubbed G-Force. I think that should be his new, when he writes his
new
next
rap name.
book.
That's his rapper name.
That's his rap
His
name.
pen name, his rap name, the whole
his
deal.
His pen name, rap name, the whole
G-Force.
thing. G-Force. Gary, so if someone's listening to this podcast, radio show / they're listening to us right now.
Aliens could be listening.
I mean,
other planets tune in, allegedly.
Perhaps.
Okay, thank you.
And they're saying, listen, I've got a business that I own, and I've got 42 employees, and I make X, Y, Z, and we do this, we do that, and I've got, 3 or 4 managers, and, they report to me, and then the 30 or 40 underneath them report to them, and I'm listening to this going, that sounds very innovative, and that sounds very cool, and, I mean, you're talking about this Chinese conglomerate, and this, this company there, and this company here, and over there. What's a takeaway as I'm listening to this podcast right now? What's a takeaway as a business guy that's going, do I just hand my business over to my employees? What do what are you saying? I just say, hey, everybody, okay, everybody gather around. We're doing. Everybody get the pizza you want. Yeah, we got pepperoni over here, cheese over here. Everybody gather around, and guess what? You guys are now in charge.
you're
okay, have a great time.
So you're asking for where's the balance then?
No. What I'm saying is, what's the step?
The step.
What are your? I mean, from this top down, which, as you know, most businesses are. You've got the owner, you've got the managers, and you've got the supervisors, you've got the employees. This is, as you so well said, this top down that's been hundreds of years around. What's a step someone says, you know what, I kind of want to try that. I want to do that. I want to empower my hourly, the bottom rung, if you will. Bottom rung, whatever you want to call it. Entry level people, the authority to come in and I want to empower them. I want to use their brain. I want to use their energy because they've got good stuff in them. How does a guy go from the old system, if you will, to transitioning? What are the steps? And where does the guy start?
Yeah.
Buy the book.
Well, super good question. That would probably help, but it's a super good question because I think, like anything, it's like if you've never worked out in your life and you show up one day at the gym and you see somebody, man or woman, but like totally buff and fit and so on. You're like, okay, how the hell do I do that? Right? That looks impossible. So there has to be a path between here and there.
Okay.
Let me also say though, and you kind of alluded to this, this is not an either or, right? I don't want anybody to think that like I am naive about how difficult it is to get people every day to be doing the right thing.
Right.
It's tough. And, in any organization, you have this balance or this kind of paradox, if you will, between discipline and creativity, between kind of freedom and control. And you're always like a parent with a toddler, where like hour by hour, minute by minute, you're trying to balance love and discipline, right? You put give the kid a timeout, and you also give them a kiss, and the kid is confused as hell, but like you're doing your best just to get that right.
Correct.
Same thing happens at work, and the argument really is that we've gotten that balance wrong, right? That most of the systems, processes, the way we think, have pushed the lever way over on the kind of the control discipline side, and we've lost a lot of that creativity. So, but you need both. It's not trading one for another is not a win. In terms of where do you start in kind of the migration path, I think the first thing is making sure that people on the front lines understand the business, right? Many organizations I go into, people right there on the front lines, they've never been taught how to think like business thinkers. They don't have business information. They're just not taught to think like people who are running a business. And so you can't ask, don't ask the ignorant for an informed opinion. You can't ask somebody to like run a business, make smart decisions if you haven't taught them to think like business people. So like for me, that's number one. I think the second thing is to have them like follow you around and ask them, what are the decisions I'm making that you guys think you're better equipped to make, that you're closer to the customer or closer to whatever's happening, where you think that you can make that decision better than I can. I'll give you a little anecdote. It's a story I tell in the book, and it certainly hit me. There was a young guy at Amazon some years back. Jeff Linden is his name. Greg Linden. And he had this idea that Amazon was collecting all this data on what shoppers were buying, and you could use this to kind of make suggestions to shoppers. You could find something that would be interesting to them that they might not otherwise find. He went to his boss and said, I have this great idea, before people check out, we'll throw up a few things they might find interesting. His boss says, Greg, that's a stupid idea. Like, we're all about simplicity. Don't confuse the customer. No. So Greg went and did it anyway. He ran a test. He, put some things up, and it turns out the customers loved them, had a big uplift in revenue. And I talked to Greg, a few weeks ago about his experience. And he said, one thing I learned in that is that the people who are closest to the problem, closest to the customer, are in the best place to innovate and to solve the problem. And so, but you have to have the information. You have to have the business skills. And then you have to have somebody, and sometimes you have to have the guts to stand up to a boss and say, I'm going to do it anyway. Ooh. But as a leader, you have to be, I think, intentional about saying, how do I give away some of my power and some of my authority? The greatest management guru, actually, I think, ever in the United States was a woman, Mary Parker Follett. She lived more than 100 years ago. And she said the goal of any leader is to create more leaders. And the goal is never to have power over, but to have power with. And if you start with an idea and every day your question is, like, how do I give people the chance to grow? How do I help them work on bigger problems? How do I get more of their skills to the fore? then naturally you are going to be moving in the right direction to kind of, uninstall bureaucracy and build something better in its place.
Zohan, you have asked many tough questions, and now we must let the great one, the G-Force, the G unit, go back.
G-Man, the G-Man.
Let him get back. He has to get back to things. He has things to do.
Gary, I know he's so fun.
Gary, I appreciate you. I appreciate you being here on the show, my friend. Thank you so much.
Don't leave us.
No, you guys are a hoot. I have to say, I've done a lot of interviews in my life. This definitely ranks as the most fun. So thank you so much for having me.
And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!
Boom. Boom. Boom.
Why does this still keep happening to me? I don't know whose prayer I'm breaking into, but I'm breaking into somebody's prayer saying, Lord, why do I keep going through the same things over and over again? And the Lord sent me here to tell you the problem is with your default. Until you change your default, you will always go back to being who you were before because you have never changed your mind. You change your friends, you change your address, you change your phone number, you change the songs you sing, you change everything else, but you didn't change your mind. There's nothing as powerful as a changed mind.
Boom! Nothing as powerful as a changed mind. Boom! Better get yours, cause I'ma take mine. Boom! Leave them where they got if they ain't ready. Used to have a lot of homies, now they dropping like a Betty. I'm like, boom! We taking over, it's our time now. Boom! Oh, you ain't know, we about to thrive now. Big, overwhelming, optimistic, momentum, A-place. Hey, back, let me get them. Go get them, then. Hurdle every obstacle, trying to do the impossible. Turned my whole life around, haters thought it was comical. Had to make some moves, didn't even seem logical. Quarterback to play, man, I had to call it audible. Drop back, stop that. Rearrange or switch it up. Only got one life to live, it's best that you gon' live it up. Failure ain't an option, ain't no way that I can give it up. Hey, knowledge, gon' pick it up. Nothing like your posse, look poppy, you cannot top me. They watch me and try to copy like Rocky, you cannot stop me. Hungrier than ever, we grinding all through the weather. We shining because we better get with us, we bout to cheddar. Once I change my mind, dog, trust me, ain't no going back. Coming for that top spot, I'm feeling like they owe me that. Time for us to level up, I feel like we've been holding back. Throw your hands up, say it with me if you know it, Dad. Boom! Nothing is powerful as a change mind. Boom! Better get yours, cause I'ma take mine. Boom! Leave them where they got if they ain't ready. Used to have a lot of homies, now they dropping like a Betty. I'm like, boom! We taking over, it's our time now. Boom! Oh, you ain't know, we about to thrive now. Big, overwhelming, optimistic, momentum, A-place. Hey, back, let me get them. Yeah. Came a long way from where I used to be. Don't need to see life the way I used to see it. Old habits die hard, but you gotta leave them. If they ain't riding like a Harley, then you don't need them. You're cheering and you're clapping, I don't need that. Fake friends treat them like Fat Joe, make them lean back. Excitement, no vision, makes you blind, I can see that. Anything I think up in my mind, I can achieve that. I can make a million if I want to. I'ma keep it real cause I want to. Other women try to holler, girl, I want you. And disrespecting wifey's what I won't do. Gon' do your dance, gon' do your dance. If you really wanna change, gotta have a plan. Even when they sit down, I'ma take a stand. Throw your hands up, say it with me if you know it, man.
Beliefs become your thoughts become your actions. So be intentional about where your passion is focused. There's no hocus pocus. We only live once, man, and you know this. You can't press the rewind, but you can make a beeline to the next level like you're headed for the tree line. I was born in Minnesota, moved to Oklahoma, incorporated both into my rhymes. Now it's time to show ya how a former stuttering student can turn out the raps with a lyrical miracle flow in the cash to match. Yeah, I'm imported, a Minnesota refugee, but I'm consistent as can be as I rap on hip-hop beats, bringing rappers and tax. Even though that I'm wise, I can play that funky music, but I ain't vanilla ice. Here we go, here we go, here we go, full steam. 3, 2, 1, dynamite on the scene.
Boom! Nothing is powerful as a change mind. Boom! Better get yours, cause I'ma take mine. Boom! Leave them where they got if they ain't ready. Used to have a lot of homies, now they dropping like a Betty. I'm like, boom! We taking over, it's our time now. Boom! Oh, you ain't know, we about to thrive now. Big, overwhelming, optimistic, momentum. Boom!
And the Lord sent me here to tell you the problem is with your default. Until you change your default, you will always go back to being who you were before because you have never changed your mind. You change your friends, you change your address, You changed your phone number, you changed the songs you sing, you changed everything else, but you didn't change your mind. There is nothing as powerful as a changed mind.
Hear the rest of T.D. Jakes' incredible, life-changing, and mind-altering sermon, Nothing as Powerful as a Changed Mind Today, by looking up T.D. Jakes on YouTube and typing in Nothing as Powerful as a Changed Mind.
You're getting ready to flow. I feel the glory.
That is a Lyrical Miracle Rap.